Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. There is nothing impossible to whom who will try. Alexander the Great. Today, I'm with a good friend, Chad Hewitt, CEO of Magnum Construction, founded in 66. That's 1966. But in 2009, Chad took over the organization and built out the scaffolding part of the organization, among other things. I'm looking to get into that and those details. And since then, Washington State, one of the top growing independent scaffolding businesses in the construction sector. Chad's a world traveler, someone that's been apparently in India for half of the year after college. We're going to unpack that, bouncing with the Hells Angels and different things around that. Huge Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, philosopher type student. We're going to unpack that. Thank you for agreeing to come on the show, brother. I've got a million questions, and really cool how we met too. Actually, we should probably talk about that. Thanks for coming on. Did I do all right with the intro? I'm a little.
Yeah, no, that you talked me up good. We're good.
So first of all, it's 2008-9. Now that I've had a lot of mortgage lending people on. So that's a crazy time. Were you already working with the organization at that time, or did you come in at that time and build out the scaffolding piece? And like, what was that like during that time in our economy? Because I've had, like I said, a lot of people on. That's a crazy time, I think. Yeah.
So I always refer to that as the best, worst time to start a business ever, right? Because, my father was getting ready to retire. So I already knew that he was getting retired in 2008, 2009. And because of where we are, when we were doing plastering at the time and scaffolding was kind of secondary, where we are in relationship to what happens in the market, we can see a slowdown coming before it just hits us right in the face. Like a guy that's a concrete guy, they're the first ones that start seeing their jobs diminish, because that's the first thing that needs to happen. Now we're servicing and installing the outside of the project, so we're literally one of the last people there. So you can kind of see the storm clouds gathering as soon as the great financial crisis hit, and my father had already predetermined that he was going to retire in 2009. So yeah, I took the business over in 2009, and when he retired, I hadn't actually been working with him long enough to really know how to do the family business, which was plastering. Like I said, scaffolding was a secondary thing that my dad introduced to the business in the probably early 2000s. And by the time he retired, that was really the only thing that I knew how to do. But, just looking at the business objectively, it was where the majority of the money was made, and there were literally no headaches involved. In fact, the worse the project went for the customer, the better it went for us, because our scaffolding was just there on rent, and we just had no labor, and we owned all of our equipment. So, it was, I just picked it up and decided that if I was going to make it, I was going to take it in the direction of a scaffolding company. And here we are, close to 15, 18, whatever years it is later. And that has proven to be a wise decision.
Were you scared?
Well, so yeah, I was pretty much scared my entire working life with him, because I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life. And that was, the only thing that I knew how to do was build scaffolding, but I actually found that, I kind of had a passion for it. And when, as part of my dad's living inheritance to me, he decided, I'm going to gift you the scaffolding equipment that we have. So I hit the ground running, because I had a bunch of things going in my favor. I had a bunch of equipment that was paid for. I had an old scaffold truck, didn't own a dollar to anybody. And, I had worked with my father on these big construction sites for many years, being kind of his right-hand man, basically a foreman and a face for the company. So when I wasn't reinventing the wheel. I was just knocking on doors that I had already opened. The customers knew my character. I was a guy that said I was going to do what I was going to do when I was going to do it. It's kind of a rare thing, actually, in the construction industry.
Really?
And a lot of these project managers, when I knocked on their door, I said, hey, my dad retired. I'm just doing scaffolding now. Can you give me a shot on one of your projects? And they were happy to do it, because the market at that point was mainly big kind of union conglomerates that had a location in cities all over the United States. And the buck didn't stop with anybody at those companies, and they didn't really have any level of customer service, no urgency. Scaffolding is very, it drives a lot of things that happen on the project. And, if they want something torn down in a week or set up in a week, a lot of the big scaffold companies are like, well, our schedule, we can't be there for 3 weeks. And that was the end of it. Whereas, I would make it happen. And that was basically, how I built the business, was just on showing up, doing what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it. And I've really never spent any money on marketing. It's always been word of mouth. And that pretty much, we're known to everybody in the industry now, but, we've been at it for a while.
If you were given advice to someone that was looking to get started in something, what would you tell them not to do?
Tell them not to do. I would tell them just the exact opposite. Don't meet with a customer and or blow a customer off, or I've had a lot of people, if you're going to go to someone's place and give them a bid on something, actually, I can't tell you how many times as a private individual looking to get something done from a contractor on a rental property, my own personal residence, where someone's actually taking the time to come to my house, spend 20 minutes with me, walking, looking at what it is that I want done, leaving and never sending me a proposal for that work. And I was fully prepared the second I saw that proposal to give the person that work, right?
Wow.
And then I'm very good at recommending other people to, so I've had a very strange experience where it's, I tell people, like, just do what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. And it's almost impossible to fail being some level of a contractor, because it just separates you right there from most of the people that are in the industry. As strange as that sounds.
How did you learn that? Like that value?
I think I actually kind of got that from my mother. My mom instilled those types of values in me at a young age.
Wow.
Basically customer service, customer relations, and a lot of, it is not being confrontational, in it for the next job, so there's some situations that I run into, quite frequently, where someone might take a, confrontational view of the situation and think that they've been wronged. And, I just look at it, realize that, okay, just an example. The other day, the scaffold guys were on top of a building. They were removing some material from the top of the building, some plastic. Well, they just decided to throw it from the main roof to the lower roof, which was 3 stories below. And, there was a bunch of corners that came in. That the siding project is called Ceraclad. It comes from Japan. It's prefabbed, it's pre-made, it's custom. So these 3 corner sections were sitting on some sawhorses. My guys threw the plastic right over the top of the building, landed on these corners, snapped them. Well, those 3 corners are $9,000.
Damn.
Right? Yeah. So, most people, and obviously my guys didn't mean to throw them down there, so I can't really get too mad at my foreman. I just said, hey, you bought me a $9,000 Christmas present. I own these corners now because of you. I'm going to put them in my office and frame them. So then I talked to the project manager, and she's a lady named Megan, and Megan said, Chad, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to back charge you for these corners. I said, hey, well, we've got 2 other projects bid with you guys right now. This is the first one we've done. And, I want to make a good impression. My guys, I'm not sure what they were doing. They didn't mean to make the corners. I have no problem. Send me the bill for $9,000. I said, do me 2 favors. One, put in a good word about our company with the project manager running this other job in Redmond. And I said, and then 2, don't tell them that we busted these corners. And she said, yeah, I can do that. I said, okay, great. So that $9,000 hit that I took led to a $500,000 contract that I signed on Friday for that next project. Now, if I'd been really adversarial and said, hey, I'm not paying for these corners, this isn't my fault, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe I get by the $9,000, but I just got a $500,000 job because I just took it on the chin and tried to get the next one, right? So I think a lot of people are very short-sighted. There's a lot of people that I've met in life and in the industry where, they're going to die on the hill of one job, where if you get a good customer, you can get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of work in the future for that company. if you think long term, and I think a lot of people think short term, right? So I take a lot of that, that's the kind of initial upbringing from my mother, and then I just kind of, expanded on it and bring it into situations like that.
For people that I don't have experience in the scaffolding as a product or a deliverable, like what exactly is the purpose? And I'm asking myself, what's the purpose of scaffolding to the lay person? Why
Okay,
is it
so
important? What does it provide to the actual?
yeah, so they call scaffolding, the invisible trade, because you'll never know that we're on a project, right?
Huh.
So I'll drive around cities all over, drive around projects all over the city. And what we do is we basically provide a temporary access system around apartment buildings so that it allows people to work on different levels. Someone's installing the windows, someone's doing the caulking, someone's doing the siding, someone's doing the brick. And when they're all said and done, we take it all down. It's like a big Lego set. And then it's like we were never there. So that's why they called it the invisible trade. But I mean, it's something that's never going to be replaced by any type of technology. We've had scaffold since the pyramids. So,
Wow.
pretty resilient industry to be in, I think.
Anyway, is it because that's how things are built? There's an exoskeleton to all of the buildings that we built. That's what I'm trying to understand. What's the purpose of scaffolding?
So the purpose of scaffolding is to get people to be able to work on the perimeter exterior of the building, so that they can install the windows, they can install the siding, they can install all the exterior finishes of that project. Because a lot of, they try to do lifts, or they try to do some of these things, just they can't get where scaffolding can get, or it just isn't feasible in that situation. So basically it's a temporary access platform just to get people to be able to get their hands on the building 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 feet up in the air, right?
Wow. But
Yeah.
and how did you what attracted you towards that versus the stucco, plaster, right? That's where how the organization was started, something with like many years ago in garage. I was reading it like garage
Oh yeah. So this goes
plaster
back to
essentially.
my family, generations, to the 1930s and 40s, when,
Wow.
my great grandfather just did whatever he could do to survive. So it was plastering, and it started with little stucco homes that are basically shoe boxes up in northern British Columbia. And then it evolved into doing, my dad really took it to the next level when he started doing, larger apartment buildings and high rises and stuff like that. So that's kind of, but the thing of it is plastering. It's also something that comes in and out of favor. So I could see there was less projects to bid. And also, I quickly realized, like, it's one of those things you really have to understand all the different nuances of that business, because you're not just putting the plastering on the outside of the building, you're putting the flashing around the windows, you're putting the vapor barrier on the exterior. So you're really responsible for the exterior envelope of a building, right? And there's so many different products, and there's so many different specs, and you've got to be able to research to put a bid together on how, the different types of materials that combine just to put some stucco on a building. It's pretty mind-numbing.
Wow.
And also, so for a brief period, I went from, my dad said, okay, you understand how to build the scaffolding, now we've got to get you to learn the plastering part of it. And I don't think I've ever been so miserable in my entire life as when I was trying to learn how to do the plastering. And I just, I have had issues with my shoulders and the actual continual motion of putting plastering on the building. I literally just couldn't do it. It's just something that hereditary. I've got bad shoulders, and long story short, I just went back to building scaffolding. But I had no passion at all for the plastering. But I decided, or I kind of figured out as he got close to retiring, that I really like doing the scaffolding thing, and I think I could make some money at it. And then when he retired, he said, you can sell us equipment, you can go back to Canada, you can do whatever you want to do. But I just kind of took the, burning the boat mentality, that there was no going back. This was either I was going to make it, or I was going to, lose everything. And, I just woke up every day and tried to make something new happen, right?
How old were you then when you got that scaffolding?
Let's see. I think it was, 2009, do some math here. I just turned 44. So whatever the math is
Yeah, I
to
mean,
get me.
you were a young guy. You were
20s.
young.
I was in my 20s.
So why not just, jerk around, party, blow it? Like, why go into why? What is the psychology behind? Dude, I want to give you acknowledge you on that. Like, first of all, in my own opinion, you're making a decision to build, basically to pivot the generational consciousness of your family into the scaffolding piece. You obviously see that there's value there at that time, one way or another, because look where you are today. So why not just take that from him and then go do nothing for a while? Like, why not just do that? Why go all in your
Well,
late
I
20s?
think that's really what happens in generational businesses. They go one way or the other.
Wow.
A business is like a shark, right? Either it grows or it dies. So I could have gone that way, but I was very conscious that, my father has a very, good lifestyle, and I kind of figured out on paper what it would cost to live like that or better. And yeah, so I could live like that for a short period of time. If I sold everything and had this big lump sum of cash, I could live like that for a short period of time, but then it would come to an end, and then I would have absolutely nothing,
Damn.
right? I'd have no, I'd be going to, who knows what I would be doing, because I don't have a formal education. I've got a high school education. I got kicked out of college at the second semester. I mean, it wasn't going to be a pretty picture. And I actually saw a very similar case where a young guy that I knew got about $300,000 from some sort of an insurance deal, and he could have invested it. He could have started a business. He could have done a bunch of things, but he
Wow.
did exactly what you said. He partied, had the jet skis, had the big truck, and for 6 months, 8 months, he lived like absolute king. Maybe even got a year out of it. But then he was broke and he was
Damn.
depressed, and he was back working a 9-to-5 construction job, and he's never really recovered from that. He's still in the same position today.
Was that that was a good friend of yours?
No, it's just, I mean, it was just someone that I knew that I went to school with, and kind of see him on Facebook, so I know where his life's at. But yeah, I was very cognizant that, this is your one shot to do something, and that lights a fire under your ass, when you have no other option but to succeed. It's a motivator like no other, right? There was no plan B for me. It was plan A or you're screwed, right? Plan A, or you're going to be some, average or potentially less than average income earner, struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. And I saw the opportunity to live so much better than that. And I just took it and ran with it.
Did you always want to be successful?
I don't know. This goes back to the what do you want to do when you grow up question, right? I knew what I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be broke. I didn't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. And like my dad said, so going back to my father had, taught me so many things in life. He said, if you're working by the hour, you can go out, you can make $400 or $500 a day. He said, but when you're working for yourself, he goes, you'll have these days where you make $10,000 in a day. And once you see behind the curtain and you see what's possible, you can never unsee that. And you just keep thinking, like, how do I make it? How do I do that? And that becomes, I had those experiences early on in business where I would go out and I'd build some scaffolding and I'd make $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in a day or two. And that starts to really motivate you to, like, yeah, if I keep doing this, I can take it and build it and grow more and more. Then success becomes an option. And once it becomes an option, and you just continue to chase it, you continue to, learn, educate, mentor, understand how to take your business yourself to the next level, and you just keep following that path. Success is a formula. If you start to model yourself after successful people and do what successful people do, it's pretty hard not to end up being successful, in my personal opinion anyways. And I had a great head start. I can't take anything away from that, but I could have done exactly what you said, blown it, partied it away, but I didn't. And thank God I didn't.
Wow. I mean, yeah. Well, I am curious though, that 2009, 10, 11, when you're okay, you have the scaffolding, and you have relationships. But what's the economy like at that time? That was a very, or were things starting to rebound, or how did you get,
No, so what
how did you survive it essentially?
yeah, sure. So first of all, I survived because, I had all this equipment paid off, and then my lifestyle was very, very minimal. I only took the absolute bare minimum out of my company that I needed to survive, pay my bills, pay my rent, whatever. I think until my business partner invested, I think the most I took out of the company in a year was maybe $50,000. And I think he invested in 2014. So I lived very lean and mean. And two things were happening at that time. The economy switched to what they call remediation jobs. So all the new apartments dried up, but what had been happening was labor rates were really high because we're in a boom, and that's what always happens. Everyone's making money, they're charging more. Then all of a sudden, the economy slows down. And in our Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of condominium buildings that had water damage, water intrusion. They're actually rotting away, and they need to be fully stripped. They call it a strip and reclad. So basically, they hire a scaffold company to come in, scaffold the complete perimeter exterior of the building. They do a containment system over it to basically make it weatherproof. And then they actually go in and they take the building right down to the studs. They remediate all the water and mold and rot that's happening in the building, and they put it all back together. So the economy switched from new construction, and what was happening was owners were pricing out those projects for the remodels or the reclads, but they were so expensive. And then all of a sudden, the great financial crisis hit, and everyone's broke. So let's just say a person that owns an apartment building got a price to do a strip and reclad in 2006. Well, maybe it's $3 million. Well, 2009 rolls around and it's $1.5 million.
Wow.
Right? So they're like, wow, everything's on sale. Let's get our building fixed while everyone's, starving and cutting each other's throats for pricing. So that led to this huge boom of remodel jobs all over everywhere. The great thing was you get the scaffold set up, and then it's on rent for 6 or 8 months, right? So you get the initial hit to put it up, and then it's just sitting there collecting rent. And my overhead was so minimal at the time, maybe $5,000 a month or something, and I'm getting $10,000 or $15,000 a month in rent. And what I was doing was I was going to auctions. I was on Craigslist. I was going anywhere and everywhere that I could, because the same time people were lowering prices, people were also selling their equipment they bought during the boom. So I'd buy 50 scaffold frames from one guy, 100 scaffold frames from another guy, go to an auction and get a truckload of gear. And that really helped me buy inventory for probably 10 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
So that's kind of how I built it. And then all of a sudden things started to turn around in about 2012, 13, started to get into some new apartment buildings. And then, sitting on a bunch of equipment that again was bought and paid for, and just put the components together, the equipment with the projects, with the labor. And, it's pretty profitable.
And are you saying part of the opportunity was because the economy went so low, those larger competitors couldn't afford to do those projects at that low price? So that was an opportunity for you as a newcomer or a smaller fish, basically, to get jobs? Or am I misunderstanding that?
So the funny thing there was I didn't know what I didn't know. So I really had no idea what I was doing bidding scaffolding when I first started. I had some tidbits from here and there because I've never worked for an actual scaffold company in my life. I just, modeled what I saw other companies doing, kind of got some data points from a few places and went out. But, I was literally, you got to think, my competitors are a big, they've got offices, they've got, a bunch of trucks and guys and tons of overhead. I was literally half the price of those companies, and I was still insanely profitable because I was the one loading the truck. I was the one building the scaffold. I was unloading the truck. I was doing the invoicing. I was literally doing everything. I worked probably 6-7 days a week, sun up to sundown. And I really, I just knew, like my dad said, it's hard to go broke making a profit. So, eventually I figured out that I was way too cheap, but I was still making money. And these scaffold companies were just scratching their head thinking, how can this guy do this for these numbers? Well, because I was literally the one-man band, but I had enough equipment to take on probably any job in the city that happened.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So what's your advice to someone that is in a season where they need to work. They need to work. They need to get up before the sun and go to bed. Like, selfishly, that's the season we're in now. We're working every day. Things are contracting in various sectors. Like, so what's your advice to me and to others we're in a season of work. Like, we need to work the way you did at the beginning, where it was just you and it was 6-7 days a week like that. That was your advantage. How'd you do it? How'd you sustain it? How'd you keep your energy that way?
Like I said, it was the burn the boat mentality. Like, no one was there to unload the truck. No one was there to load the truck. It had to get done, right? And then there was the carrot at the end of that where I could see I was making money, right? So I would just say that, understanding and finding a mentor, someone that's been, so that's because what I've done with every kind of aspect of my life. Find a mentor, find someone that's been where you've been, find someone that's where you are, that's where you want to go, and just ask them that question. So for me, you asking me that, there was no other option. So no one's going to do it, right? If you want to fail, then yeah, go home and watch a movie, play some video games or whatever. But if you want to be successful, you better get after it and figure it out. And you got to be the first one in, the last one out. But you have to realize you can't do that forever. So you got to be thinking, how do I add in this next person? And it wasn't actually until I got some random marketing call from some sort of a consulting company that, said, hey, what if we come in, analyze your business, show you how to increase your revenue 3 times in the next year or something to that effect. And it was pretty expensive, but good things aren't cheap. I think it was like $20,000, and by the time they got finished with me, I think it was at around $50,000.
Nice.
But they came in and they said, well, what are you best at? I said, well, I'm best at probably getting work and scheduling work. And they said, well, do you think you're the best scaffold erector in the world? I said, no, definitely not the best. They said, well, you should find the best scaffold, team that you can afford. And they said, do you think that you're best at invoicing? And I said, no. And he said, well, all these things are taking time. So if you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else, right? So I think that, you have to get capital behind you so that you have the ability to start delegating on what you're not best at. So I think that out of the gate, you have to do it all yourself, but you always have to be thinking, what am I best at? What can I delegate? And how do I get enough money? A big thing for me, game changer, was when I paid the first girl that I had in the office to do invoicing. I think she was like $40,000 a year.
Wow.
That let me go and sell and, get work. And I think our revenues, doubled within the next year, because I had that person just doing the administrative part of it, and all I was doing was selling, right? And then I got some really good scaffold erectors, which then freed me up more to organize, to sell. And then I got someone that was really good in managing my scaffold yard, and now he was loading the trucks and unloading the trucks. So I think it's a natural progression from any business that is, especially the type of business that we're in, kind of blue collar stuff, that you have to do it all yourself. But then you have to realize you can't do everything on your own, and you shouldn't, right? You can never grow a business like that. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that mindset. If I'm not doing it, it's not getting done right. Well, if you're doing it, that's great. It's getting done right, that's great. But what are you best at? And just focusing your efforts on what you're the best at.
Were you apprehensive to hire that person in the invoicing? And then why? And then, like, what would be your advice to somebody that's listening to this right now that's going through that exact same thing?
No, because I understood what it looked like to do it myself. So, worst case scenario, I hire someone, it doesn't work out, I go back to doing it myself. But I've never been afraid to try something new. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But as soon as I made that one hire, the light bulb went on in my head that, okay, now it's about the team, getting the best team of people around me that I possibly can in all aspects, and just let me do what I'm best at.
To you, what makes a good team, a good team culture?
Well, everyone's got to be rowing in the same direction, and everyone, the book Good to Great, as a CEO, they talk about that you're the bus driver, right? You have to find the right people to put on the bus, And then once you got the right people on the bus, then you drive it. And the litmus test is to who is to be on the bus. And the question I ask myself all the time is, if you were to hire, so an existing personnel, if you were to be hiring for this position today, say my superintendent, my operations manager, if you're going to be hiring for this position today, and this applicant comes in, you know, he comes in knowing what you know about working with them now, would you hire them again? And if it's not a resounding yes, then that person needs to get off the bus immediately.
Wow.
So it's about understanding, getting like-minded people behind you that are behind the goals and the vision for the company, and asking yourself that question frequently, you know, do I have anybody on the bus that shouldn't be here? Because, you know, characters can be very toxic, right? And nothing is worse than having a toxic employee. I've had some guys that are amazing scaffold erectors or amazing, you know, superintendent, but then there's a level of toxicity to them where, you know, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, as my dad would say. You got to get rid of that person. So that's my thought on team, is that you got to have people, you know, you spend more time with your team than your family, your wife, anything. So you got to have people that have good character, that you know that they're gonna act the same way at work when your back's turned, is when you're having direct conversations with them, right? As soon as I find someone that has character and, you know, can actually do the job, I don't micromanage people. I get out of the way. I seldomly pester any of my employees with anything, because it's taken a long time to put that group of people together. But as you know, grow a business, you start to find out if those are the people, you know, sooner rather than later. Once I see someone make a couple really good critical decisions on their own without my interference, and they would have, you know, taken the same course of action that I do, I pretty much leave them alone, right? So when someone comes in at a high level, I'll shadow them for maybe a week, and if they're the right person, I don't really need to bother them after that.
What are some ways to, so let's say someone's not in alignment, a fit, what are some ways to move the relationship in another direction that's worked? So that other direction meaning they're not a part of the organization anymore. What would be your advice? Like how long should one wait? Should it be quick? Should it be?
It's got to be.
How do you go about it?
As soon as you've got that person, like I had this with my general foreman not too long ago, that he came to me on referral from a couple other people, and I watched what he was doing. Wasn't super impressed. We were paying this guy a bunch of money, and then I saw one thing on a job, and as soon as I saw that one thing, it told me the entire. I won't bore you with the story, but it told me the entire character of that person. And there's no coming back from that, because once you don't trust them, you know, and they have to be in a position where they're not being monitored, you know, like, because like I said, I don't micromanage people. So maybe I could have turned it around if I wanted to micromanage him. I don't want to micromanage people. It takes too much time and effort. I'd rather cut my losses, bring somebody else in and start all over again, because those people, there's typically no fixing them, right?
What do you think happens what do you think happens? Let's say you didn't, and you didn't even change. What would have happened to the organization had you let that person stay in your mind? The way that people
start to realize, like, you know, this person wasn't being safe. He wasn't being productive. So what does that tell? And everybody knows he's getting paid the most money. So if you have someone in your organization that has the most responsibility, getting paid the most money, and they are not upholding the minimum standards for safety and production, that then goes into the organization, where someone that's, say, making $10 an hour less is kind of thinking, well, you know, this guy's making this and I should be making more, right? And it just breeds these problems where it can spread through the company really quickly. So you just have to cut ties, you know. And I've tried to hang on in the past when I was younger, and you know, try to move him to a different position, and it just never works out, right? So
why do you think that doesn't work? What do you know?
Because if you have someone that doesn't have any character, or someone that, you know, doesn't really have a lot of drive, or is the type of person that, you know, pulls back when they're not being watched, you can put them in any position and that's going to happen, whether it's a safety role or managing the yard roll or whatever the case may be, that type of work ethic follows that person wherever they go, you know?
Why do you think you were moving them around in your youth, and like why was there apprehension?
Because I thought, well, I can't find someone to replace them. So I
Mm.
had, I had one guy that was a really great superintendent, and he had a drinking problem, right? So every couple weeks, Friday morning, the schedule goes out Thursday night, and Friday morning, the guys go where they need to go, right? Well, Friday morning, my phone would start blowing up because the schedule wasn't out. I had 40 guys that didn't know what job they were going to, right? And I'd call my superintendent, and he would be so drunk he could barely string together a sentence.
Oh no.
And then he'd, it's never going to happen again. And he was so good at what he did, but this was like every month, one time this would happen, right? And eventually I had to cut ties with him. But I was in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to find someone good enough. I've just got to, I can deal with 95% of the time him being off, and these one time, a few times that happen, I'll just deal with it, right? But then that is a bad look for your organization. It's just becomes a morale killer, and it's very costly. You got 40 guys that should go out and generate $30,000, $40,000 for the company that day. That happens once a month. We'll factor that over the course of a year, right? And like I said, I was just really scared that I wouldn't find someone good enough. But by the grace of God, someone always comes in to fill those boots, and they're better than the last person, or you find a way to get it done. And that was an example of someone that I was scared to let go in my youth, but I wouldn't put up with that for an instant. Now, first time it happened, that would be it. Because I know it'll just be the next time and the next time and the next time.
Would you say that then it always works out for the better of the company, even on the bottom line, but it's scary and counterintuitive at some degree?
Well, the bottom line isn't everything, right? Because if you have a toxic culture and you have a great bottom line, that just kind of consumes you as a person. I'd rather have a great
Powerful.
team of people and make less money because I've got great people that, and we figure out, how do we get better? Because sometimes, like I said, you just have to, there's a trade-off that happens, and I'm not willing to trade the culture of the company for profits.
I want to learn more about you said your great grandfather was he a Viking or something, doing building? Like, I'm trying to understand, because culturally that's fascinating to me, that it's a familial, at least in the consciousness of it, or the mind share, working with the hands or construction. That's been a part of the history of your family. Would that be an accurate observation? Or
Yeah, so I mean, up in British Columbia, it gets so cold in northern British Columbia, you can't do work relative to, concrete all year long, right? Because it's too cold, it freezes, whatever. So it was kind of one of the things in the wintertime. I think my great grandfather did logging in the wintertime. And then when the weather turned and it was nice enough to do plastering, you get into plastering, and you'd get into, anything that those people could do to pay the bills. But the plastering thing became my dad's main source of work. He moved down to the lower mainland, and the weather's more temperate there, so it becomes a year-round thing. But in our family, it started from my great grandfather just doing anything he could to make a living, and then to his son with my grandfather, he focused more on scaffolding, but I think in the stucco and plastering. But then he still, he had his team of horses, and they would do logging. My dad would go out with my grandfather, and they would chop trees down, and they had horses that would drag them down and buck them up and send them to the mill. And then my dad took it solely in the direction. I think he started his company when he was about 16. Stuck in someone's garage for the first time, and then he just took it off and just went full-time plastering.
Did your grandfather have his own business, or was he more working for other people and your father started?
Nope. My grandfather, I think he started Hewitt Plastering. I think was the name of it. My father's company was called Valley Stucco. Was the name of his company, but Hewitt Plastering was the original actual business name of the company way back in the day.
Oh, even was that the same one that became Magnum, or did it?
So it was basically if you're looking at, Magnum was its own business, right? But it was just passed down from, so passing the trade down to my father, who tried to pass it down to me, but basically I didn't learn it. So I just took the opportunity to move it in the direction of starting a scaffold company instead of continuing to do the plastering, the stucco.
Wow. What's it like? How do you transfer that lived experience or that personal experience, the family culture, to someone? How do you explain that to somebody that, they don't have any idea of what generational trades are? I would think it would be a completely different experience from like, Bob, who has, his family's nothing to do with anything, that's just like gonna go to college and think, oh, I'm gonna be, a stockbroker because I just feel like it. It's
Yeah,
got to be a totally different experience to when your dad's into something and your dad's into something. And like, can you try to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think what it really boils down to, it doesn't really matter what they are. The family was entrepreneurial, right? My grandfather didn't go get a job doing plastering. He started his own plastering company. He didn't get a job doing logging. He went and got his own logs, right? So I grew up watching, in a family of entrepreneurs and people that didn't work for other people, they worked for themselves. So, people that have watched their family grow up just working, mom and dad have jobs. It's a different mindset to think of starting your own company. But in my family, that's just what you did. You didn't really go and work for somebody else. You had your own business and you made your own.
Could you imagine ever working for someone?
Oh, well, I mean, I did for a period of time, and I know what that's like, and I couldn't imagine doing it now, definitely. But yeah, no, that would not suit my personality these days to go to work for somebody at all.
How'd you end up in the Hell's Angels, like whatever that was? I'm not explaining it right. It sounds like you were in the Hell's Angels. No. How'd you end up, working in a bar owned by the Hell's Angels? I just say it that way.
Can I pause for a second? Just use the restroom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I don't know how you do edit, whatever, but do you want to ask that question again, or do you want to just roll from there?
Yeah, we're yeah, 3, 2, 1. How did you end up working in a Hell's Angels bar or club or whatnot? And was that in high school or in college and before you decided to start the company?
Yeah, so right out of high school, I started working for my cousin. So my cousin worked for my father for a number of years, and then he branched out and started his own plastering company in British Columbia. So when I got out of high school, I went and worked for him long enough to know that, I hated doing plastering, and decided that I better, try and get an education. So I started going to college for a very short period of time. And when I was in college, I went to get a part-time job at a restaurant, and I was standing at a restaurant with my resume. And this blonde lady walked in and asked me, I said, "Are you looking for a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm waiting to talk to the manager." And she said, "Well, I'm just here doing some promotion stuff for a nightclub. And she goes, we're actually looking for people to work there. And she goes, I can guarantee that it's going to be more fun than working at this restaurant. So I didn't wait around for the manager. I grabbed
Wow.
the address to the club she was talking about, and actually worked at 2 nightclubs. So this was the first one that I worked at. It was called China Beach. I went there, got a job as a busser. So that started my nightlife career, or my bartending career. And my college career simultaneously nosedive. But anyways, long story short, I ended up working at the second nightclub, which was owned by, it was called On the Rocks. And it was owned by, come to find out later, is owned by Hell's Angels. So that was a pretty wild environment working with those guys. And just a little cliff note in the book of life for me. But that's how I ended up working.
Were you a bouncer?
No, so I was a
brolic.
No, I was a bartender there. I was a bar back and a bartender. So I initially started by, bar backs are kind of the bartender's right-hand man. They make sure they've got all the alcohol and all the, they don't run out of anything, glassware, alcohol, whatever it is that they need. And then I got promoted to being a bartender. And I worked there for several years. And then I just kind of had this epiphany one night where I was watching the head bartender that night, and we're closing the shop down, and this has been maybe, feels like I worked there for a long time, but I remember it was like my 22nd birthday that I was, in there working, and shut the club down. And I watched the head bartender go out to his truck. So this guy would represent like the pinnacle of where I could possibly get in this position. And, at the end of his shift, he's outside smoking a cigarette next to his, crappy old truck. And, I just thought, man, if I'm going to wake up 10 years from now and I'm going to be that guy. And it just kind of gave me this really sick feeling in my stomach. And I remember I woke up the next day and I'm like, man, I got to go talk to my dad. I got to figure out something else. Right. So that kind of,
wow.
Because then,
what did he say to you?
So I sat down with him and I said, hey, I want to come back. I want to come and work for you. And I said, but my goal is to take the company over. And my dad just kind of looked at me and laughed. And he goes, well, it's a great goal. He goes, but, you got to start from the ground up. So let's start there and see where it goes. Right. So that's kind of how it started. And this is how it's ended up.
Why do you think he was the type to do that approach and not just give you, the golden keys or whatnot? And was that the right decision? I mean, because by the way, like Chad, I'm asking because frankly, I think the cliche or the cultural bias is that it was, it's kind of like the TV shows when it comes to generational stuff. I may be presuming a lot, but like, it sounds like you've had a different experience, like where you had to do it on a lot of things on your own.
Yeah, well, I think, my dad is a learn by doing guy. And if you want to, I know how to solve every problem in my business because I've hands-on done them, right? I don't think there's any other way to learn this type of a business, especially in a contracting thing, other than to go in, put your hands on it, do the work, understand, how to be successful. I just don't think, and I think my father just knew that. You can't, some kid that's his father's, it's because your dad runs the company or his dad owns the company. They're not going to have any respect for the person giving them orders because he has no idea what he's even talking about, right? Whereas, I could, after a number of years working for my dad, I did get the respect from the guys because they did know that I knew that I was doing. And not only was the boss's son, I was the first guy to the job site. I was the last guy to the job site, right? And I think a lot of the people have this conception that, you get a silver spoon in your mouth and you don't have to work as hard as everybody else, and you get, the fruits of labor that you didn't really earn. And that definitely did not happen with me. I earned everything that I have now, I think. I mean, other than, like I said, it can't take away the running start that I had with the equipment that I had. But, I don't think that you can really be successful in a number of things unless you've actually done them. Right.
You think he was trying to do like help you, but also not hurt you by just at least giving you the equipment to start with, and not, because that's the first thing that comes to my mind is like, that's pretty interesting solution to the natural cultural conflicts that come with, having a son that wants to go do it. So my thought is like, was that the test essentially? You could have got the equipment and went and partied and went crazy, or you could have got the equipment and then not been able to sell, not been able to keep your word and show up. Like you could have got, anybody could have got the equipment and not succeeded. So you think that was him? That's just like the first thought that comes to my mind. Like, was that
Oh
him
yeah,
trying
so
to
when
reconcile
my
that?
dad and I, my father and I rehashed this story, he said, I wanted to give you something as a living inheritance. I didn't want to pass on money to you after I was gone. I wanted to see what you could do with something, while I'm here. And he
Wow.
said scaffolding was really that test. Like, what is this kid going to do with this? And I've gone above and beyond any expectations that he's ever had, and even any expectations that I've ever had of what this could actually turn into.
What's your advice to parents that are going through it now? Like, right, they're because we have an audience, all sorts of different people listening to this, people in your father's position or where you'll be someday, may or may not with your own children. Like,
I
what
think my
you were on
main
the
thing
other
is,
side of it. You were the person.
yeah, and I've got a 3-year-old daughter right now. I started a little bit late in life having kids, but I think my
Seneca,
big
right? It's a cool
yeah,
name.
Seneca. Yeah, Seneca. I think my biggest thing is let your kids fail. Let them fail over and over, and let them fail fast, and let them fail hard, because you don't learn much by winning. And that's just the truth of it. And I think that the big thing that I see in society and education today is they don't want kids to fail. They don't want kids to have a down moment. They always want to have them feel good about themselves or feel like they won. And that's not how life works, right? You get your ass kicked, you get back up, dust yourself off, figure out, okay, well, that sucked. How does that not happen again? And then some other, way down the road, you get your ass kicked again, or something terrible happens to you and you get back up again and say, okay, well, how does that not happen again? And those are moments that you can't teach someone. You can't put that in a textbook, right? You have to live that experience, and you got to take the bubble wrap off your kids and let them fail, but be there to explain that within the seed of every failure is the seed of success, right? And that's, I think, the biggest piece of wisdom that I could give parents right now.
What was the pandemic like? Was that an adversity? Was it a slingshot? Was it neither here nor there? Everyone was impacted differently through that time. Without going into some kind of, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm not trying to lead you into somewhere uncomfortable. Just from a business standpoint, like, was it? Yeah.
No, for us, I mean, we couldn't work. They shut all the job sites down.
Damn.
And you just couldn't work, right? And I mean, thankfully, we're blessed with having, we're a pretty big company, but we own everything. We don't have any big payments hanging over our head. I think we got some abatement on the mortgage that we have where we operate out of for our business. We got 6 months of deferred payments on, the loan that we typically have to pay. And it was like a weird, like, summer break for us, because it kind of happened in the summertime when they eventually shut everything down. And, I couldn't work. So it wasn't a matter of like, I need to get to work. There was nowhere to go. All the job sites were shut down. So if I'd been in a situation where I wasn't sitting on some liquidity and I had big payments coming in that had to continue to be made, it would have been a completely different experience. But it was kind of like a big vacation for me, honestly. I know it wasn't for a lot of people, but it's what it was like for me.
Partnerships. What's your advice around partnerships? Because I believe it was within 5 or 6 years of you really going all in, you brought in partners. Has that been instrumental in your growth? And
Oh yeah, no, definitely been instrumental in my growth. And I think that so what we're referring to is my current partner and CFO, Daniel Stiles. So backstory on that, there was a company locally in that time that was going bankrupt. They had expanded all over the United States, and all of a sudden, the music stopped, and now they're selling everything off. They're in receivership. My CFO was actually he's a private equity guy, and he got in with a group and pooled capital together to buy the assets of that company out of bankruptcy, sell off all the material that was at the satellite branches, and restructure and reorganize and regroup basically, and form a new scaffold company in California called California Access. So he is a part owner in that company in California Access down in, I think they're just outside of LA. And then he was selling off all this equipment up here. Now, I knew this equipment was going to go for sale, and I dug and found out who the point of contact would be to buy the equipment. And it turned out to be Daniel Stiles. So what happened there was I was on, the phone with him on a weekly basis, because like I said, as soon as I got some money, I was like a kid in a candy store down there. I'd go down to their scaffold yard and and got to know every square inch of it, because I just walk around and daydream and wonder how I'd be able to buy all this stuff. And multiple conversations with him. Well, one night they got broken into, and he called me and said, hey, I don't really know anybody up there, and you know that yard probably better than anybody else. Could you do me a favor and drive down and see what happened? And so I went down and I saw where, they had cut the fence open and stole all this aluminum. And I just happened to have some pictures of it on my phone that helped them take it to the insurance company and get a claim and get all the money back for that equipment. And he said, hey, I'm going to be in town in the next couple of weeks. And he goes, I kind of offer a service where I do consulting with smaller companies on a CFO level that don't have CFOs, but need them, but can't afford a full-time CEO. Would you be interested in bringing your financials, which was just my QuickBooks profit and loss, and sitting down and talking with me? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. Just like I said, it goes to that mentoring type situation. And I don't know this guy, but it's, sit down and have a conversation with him. So I met him at this pizza joint down in south of Seattle, and you had a great conversation, and he looked at my financials and he said, well, you don't have anything really to gap. And he goes, I can see through this and see the story of your business, but anybody that looks at this is not going to take you seriously. And what you need to do is consolidate some of this debt and get a working line of capital for your business. And he goes, I'd like to offer to do a consulting, with you for the next 6 months to get your books to gap. Once your books are to gap, you can take that into some banks, and I think you need to get $1 million. You need $500,000 working line of credit, and you've got $500,000 of really high interest loans with different, other scaffold people that sell scaffolding. Because I was buying most of it for cash with it. I'd worked out some deals where I'm paying credit card interest rates to some other people, and so I thought, okay, well, let's do this for 6 months. So 6 months goes by, and we have this working relationship. He gives me this package to go into the banks, and I had banks falling over themselves to lend me the $1 million, because they saw how profitable the company was and how good the financials were. And so that led to a conversation where he said, well, at the end of this consulting package, he said, would you ever consider a partner in your business? Now, I've had other people try to buy into the company before, but I realized that the only thing they were going to really bring me was money. And I really already knew that I knew how to make money. So I get this one lump sum of cash up front, but after that, I've got a person that doesn't really offer any value. And, I kind of had that in the back of my mind. So my business partner, now Daniel, he's I call him the Michael Jordan of finance. He's got his MBA from the Wharton School of Business. Then he went on to represent Wharton at the International School of Business, and I think it's Stockholm. Wow. And then he spent, I think, 4 or 5 years on Wall Street. He said sleeping at his desk as a mergers and acquisition analyst for Morgan Stanley. Wow. So he said, yeah, would you be interested in a partner? And I realized, like, this guy brings a level of financial education and credibility that my entire lifetime, I will never even get anywhere close to what this guy brings. So it was a very easy decision for me. And the litmus test for me at that point was, what's the offer going to be, right? Is he going to try and lowball me? Because we were only doing a couple $1 million in sales at the time. We're in a very big business. And, I had offers to buy 10% of the business for $50,000 or something like that before, And I thought, okay, well, this will be the test, because if it's not a real number, and I had an idea what the business is worth in my mind, and I thought, well, if it's not a real number, then this guy is not going to be a good business partner. And I said, well, what's the number? And if you've ever seen the show The Profit, he literally pulled his checkbook out and wrote a check for $500,000 and slid it across the table to me. And you got to think, at that time, the most I'd ever paid myself in a single year was $500,000 or $50,000, right? So I'm staring at a check for $500,000, and a guy that, has adds a level of something to a business that you just, like a godsend. You just can't. If you went out and looked for it, it'd be hard to find, right? So we did that deal. We First year he was involved, we did $2 million in sales. And I think in 2019 was our high watermark. Just before COVID, we were just close to 10 million in sales.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why did he pick you, you think?
I think he just saw the potential in, well, first of all, he had already got a glimpse of another scaffold company, saw their book, saw where they went wrong, and saw, the potential in that business. It's a very niche market. We've got good margins in this business. It's just not he's always looking for a business where he can insert himself, help elevate the processes and the financials of the business. He's invested in business. I'm just one of, I think, 14 companies that he's invested in the United States. But I think he just saw, he said, I look for good operators, and I look for good businesses that are, kind of just basically niche market type things is what he goes after. And he's, attracted to the scaffold market. And he goes, I just like, we had some personal situations where I showed him what my character looked like. And he just said, I like you as a person, I like your business, and I want to be involved with this. And I think just basically that's his, and he also we got to work together for 6 months in that consulting package. And then I come out to find out later on the back end that that's usually the way that he decides if he wants to offer a business, is he gets in, sees what's going on, knows the team, because he was coming and flying in and seeing me about every 6 weeks in that 6 months. And he was sitting down with me, he was sitting down with the girls in the office, and he was really getting to look at the culture, the team, behind the business. And that's when he made the offer. So he doesn't make anything, he took 6 months to come to that decision. So he's,
Wow.
very calculated. He never makes, that's the difference between him and me. I make decisions on the fly all the time. He takes 6 weeks, 6 months to make a decision, but I think that's just what led him to want to buy in.
There's a lot of people out there just doing what you're saying. I see it everywhere, where you said, they're just offering money, not a partnership. So what would your advice be to people of how to figure out which one it is? Because you've been through this now, and it's obviously 2 to 10. That's hugely successful by a lot of metrics. But like, what's your advice to people that are being offered, investment or what have you, to know whether it's going to be a good partner or not? I hear the horror stories,
Yeah, partnerships are like marriages. They're easy to get in, and they're really hard to get out. So I would say to anybody, before, no matter what your feelings are with your partner, make sure you have some sort of an exit clause that, covers you in case they're not the person that they think that, that you think that they were. So, I think that first and foremost is, no matter how good your relationship is, you got to have a better worst case scenario exit plan, right? So that's my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice is, money is pretty easy to find if you're just looking for capital. You can knock on a lot of doors. Most of them will be slammed in your face, but eventually one of them will open. If you have a business that, looks good on paper and looks like it could pay back whatever money that it is that you want to borrow. But if all the person is doing is bringing money to your business, I would look elsewhere. They have to bring something to the business that you don't have, some skill or some asset that you could never hope to attain, or knowledge that you could never hope to learn or grasp to the level that they do in your lifetime. You really, because like I said, it is such a huge decision to make. Though that would be my criteria. You got to have a good exit plan, and you've got to have something brought to the table that you don't have already. And it just can't be money, because there's lots of money in the world.
We met at, we should definitely want to give a shout out to Jason Hartman, the Empowered Investor Live. That's where we met, which was awesome for me, because I was really struggling with my social anxiety there. And I met you and one other person, Rick, who was just amazing. Who, when we're going to go, by the way, to see Jordan Peterson in Billings, me and
I just missed him the other day. He was
did you?
In Everett. Yeah, I found out about it like last minute and I couldn't go, but that'll be fun.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try and see Rick, actually, who also met at that, and you and I met, which was awesome. That was around real estate investing. Is that something that you've been a part of for some time, or what would be your? I know you've been a part of different things, but like, what's your advice on how to approach the investment of real estate? What has worked well, what hasn't worked well? How does that flow with having a business in your mind?
Yeah, no, very, very complimentary. So my mother, she was like the Oprah book club, right? And one of the book clubs was Rich
Oh,
Dad
wow.
Poor Dad. So she gave that to me for my birthday one year. And my father he was great in business, but he never really got too much into investing. He was in traditional, 401ks in Canada, they're called RRSPs, and shied away from using leverage, paid everything cash, kind of an old school mentality, but it served him well. And then I read this book by Robert Kiyosaki, and it lit a fire in me that is still burning bright today, where understanding how to use leverage, how to buy tax favored assets, how to mitigate the amount that you pay in taxes. And yeah, so it's by the time, for the first part of my business career, I spent all my money buying equipment for the company. But in the back of my mind, there was going to be a point where I had enough equipment, and now all the excess profits would go to buying real estate. So yeah, I started buying real estate. I bought my first piece of property, I think in 2009, but that was like a duplex, and it was some sort of program Obama was running. I got into it for like 3.5% down. It was $270,000. I sold it not too long ago for $700,000 and did the whole 31 exchange. But yeah, as I built the scaffold company to the level I wanted it to be at, then we started taking profits and pretty much plowed all that into different types of real estate. So my portfolio right now hovers around $35 million worth of property, and that's between triple net properties, industrial properties, single family stuff. And yeah, I'm really love real estate. I love running numbers. I love using debt. And and that's how we ended up meeting at the Jason Hartman conference.
Amazing. Well, how I have more on the real estate, but like, how important has it been going to conferences, meeting people, being a bit more social? I mean, what advice do you have for me on that too? Because that's something I really struggle with. Was that something that came naturally to you? Because you're pretty personable, in my view, or did you have to like learn how to be more personable?
No, I'm pretty easy striking up a conversation in an elevator or anywhere that I happen to be. And I've always gone to those types of conferences, and mostly, the things that are happening at those conferences, I could almost give the speeches myself because I've listened to so many of the podcasts over and over again. And I go to meet the people, right? I go to make connections with people like yourself. And those I look forward to going to those. I'm going to another one here in June, a mastermind group called Power Room. I think I told you about that one. That's also going to be in Scottsdale, and looking forward to meeting new like-minded people there as well, because that's what I find is that I'm kind of isolated in the groups that I am locally. But when you go to an event like that, you just find so many like-minded people that are just all doing really interesting things. You just have these amazing conversations, you make these cool connections, and that's my biggest thing is just, you go there, you never know who you're going to meet, you never know what connection you're going to make, and you never know what road that's going to take you on. So to me, my dad has this saying about looking under rocks, and you never know what's going to be under a rock, flip it over and see what's there. So those conferences are like looking under rocks. I never know who I'm going to meet, I never know what direction it's going to take, and I've met some amazing people and got brought into some pretty interesting opportunities because I've connected with investors, and yeah, I just like meeting like-minded people.
What's the 65-35 mean? That I got.
So that's my dad's saying. Yeah, that's my dad saying 65-35, right? So I'll ask my dad something like, do you think this is going to happen? Or do you think we're going to get this job? And he'll say, well, son, 65-35. So nothing's 50-50 in his world. It's something has a greater degree of happening, but you don't know what it is. And he'll say, well, I just don't know if it's going to be the 65 or it's going to be the 35, right? And that's just kind of just an ongoing running joke that we have on any situation. I'll say, well, what do you think, Dad? Well, we can't really make up our mind. He goes, well, or think what's going to happen, or try to predict the future. And he says, well, son, it's a 65-35 situation. But you don't know. It's something's more probable than the other. Very rarely is anything 50-50, right? So that's
Interesting.
where that
Yeah, like
comes.
what's the lesson in that?
Expect the unexpected, I mean, if you think it's 50-50, it's not. Something's 65, and it might not be the thing that you want to be 65 to happen, but that's just expect the
Like
unexpected.
get ready for the shit storm.
Exactly, 100%. That's what it is. 65-35, right? You don't know which one's going to happen, so you got to plan for both of them. My dad, one of the things he instilled in me, he said, son, when you're in business, you need to have a plan A, you need to have a plan B, you need to have a plan C, and you need to have a plan D
Wow.
at all times for everything that's going to happen. So I think like that, and that's a very valuable lesson, especially as an entrepreneur. You have to have backups for backups plans, because nothing makes God smile more than if you put a plan together, because it'll never turn out the way you think it's going to, right? So you always got to be ready to pivot. And as a CEO of a business, the bigger it gets, the faster you need to be able to make decisions, right? Something goes sideways, I got 50 people staring at me. I need to make a decision instantly, right? I can't be, I'm the leader. And even if it's the wrong way, I might turn the guys around and march them in the wrong direction, but I made that decision. We're confident. And if it's the wrong direction, while I'm marching, I'm going to figure out, if this is the wrong direction, what's plan B, right? So as an entrepreneur, I think that you always have to have multiple plans of attack, multiple, strategies, and prepare for that 65-35 situation where the unexpected happens.
On the real estate, what are some of those unexpecteds that people, because we read the books, our listeners are interested in real estate, a lot of them. What are some of the unexpected things that happen? You built a sizable, obviously, a serious amount of real estate through the business's success. What are some of the unexpected things that people may not account for? Like, and then what's your advice around how to go and build that?
Well, I think that when especially within the whole COVID thing that happened, I think the biggest eye opener for real estate investors were, government agencies stepping in and saying that people didn't have to pay their rents anymore, because I was sure paying my mortgage every month to the bank, right? So preparing for unexpected things, when you're putting those deals together, they're always contingent upon that rental coming through every month. And that's a 65-35 proposition every month, right? You've got 50 different properties with 50 different people that are going through 50 different things in life. And all of a sudden, 5, 10, 20, people aren't paying rent. I think that the easiest way to prepare yourself for that situation is having liquidity. If you think 3 months worth of reserves, you should keep 6, and better to have 9. In my case, I try to keep a year of reserves for all properties, just sidelined in some very liquid asset. Usually, I'm a big proponent of the infinite banking concept, the whole life insurance policies. So in the case of real estate, money will typically get you out of most problems, right? I think some of the mistakes that I've made in the past is, as an out-of-state investor, I bought in markets I didn't really understand. And hindsight being 2020, if I'd done a little bit more due diligence on the area, probably wouldn't have invested in some of the locations that I am now, because they're a little bit, they're not in the greatest area, or they don't have the greatest drivers for, for jobs, or just some demographic situation that's not really in favor. So there's, and then understanding, I'm not a big fine print guy, so I usually learn the hard way what different types of things like yield maintenance mean on loans, right? I would sell a property and they're like, well, Chad, this loan's yield maintenance. And at the time I got the loan, 5 years prior, it was for a multifamily thing that I had, the rate just looked good. And I thought, yeah, go ahead and sign it. And then I go to sell the property and I find out that yield maintenance means that you're obligated to pay them the interest on the loan for the time of the loan, right? So that was like $100,000 that I had to pay to the bank that I wasn't really expecting to pay to the bank. But again, like I said, I that's my one downfall, is that I make decisions to buy things pretty quickly, and I'm not the best person reading, things like that. So now from that experience, that's why I have a lawyer that I pay to review all the documents that I sign. I'm buying triple net properties now. I'm buying like Walgreens, and I like the medical space, right? The human body's never going out of style, and it's always going to break down and need some level of repair. So that's the space that I'm kind of focused in now, with medical properties, dialysis centers, pharmacies, things like that. And I pay a lawyer. He usually costs me $15,000 to read through most of the documents, and he'll just say, pick out the deal points to me, because I'm not good at that. I could read that entire document. It would basically not mean anything to me, where, I pay this guy a lump sum of money, and I'm going to invest, several $1 million and lever it up to buy a $7 million property. And now I've got a $10,000 insurance policy because I've had a qualified professional read through and pick out all the landmines before I step on them.
What's your advice to people that can't let go of that, or would feel embarrassed or shame around not being able to do it all themselves?
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I always tell them, this isn't your area of expertise, right? So it comes down to an ego thing. Do you want to have an ego about it, or do you want to sleep at night, right? I don't have much of an ego. As soon as I come into any problem that isn't in my wheelhouse, my first response is, how do I find an expert that I can pay to get an answer that I'm going to be able to sleep at night with, right? So I just tell them, you can have an ego or you can be successful. I had someone that has a smaller scaffold company that was saying, that they didn't want to consult this other company because it would make them look like they don't know what they're doing. And I said, well, you don't know what you're doing, right? So pay these people so that they can design this system that you're going to build. So when you go to a meeting, you actually do know what you're doing, right? And I just
Makes
think
a lot
that's
of sense.
very, and when I hang around successful people, they all have some expert on speed dial with whatever it is that they're looking at, whether it's contracts or finance or whatever the case may be. Is, they're smart enough to know that they don't know everything. And it's way easier to pick up a phone call and cut a check to someone that has spent their entire life reading net lease contracts. Who would you rather do that with? When I went and bought my first Walgreens, I was kind of intimidated to do that. And
yeah, by the way, that sounds extremely badass.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool to say that you own a Walgreens,
When I went go to buy my first Walgreens. Let
But,
me brag for you. That sounds really fun. Like, come on, I grew up just like me and my mom going to these. That's how, not well, right? And like to think about, oh yeah, I just bought my Walgreens. That just triggered so many memories, like going into those places,
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But I had the agent, and he said, well, do you want to read the contract, or I've got a lawyer that specializes in it. And it wasn't even a thought. I said, yeah, what does he cost? He said, he's 10 to 20,000. I said, didn't even blink. I said, yeah, that's money worth spending for me, because I'm about to, sign a loan for $5 million that I'm going to be obligated for. So $10,000 with a $5 million hanging over my head. Yeah, that seems like a trade that, I'll make.
Why do you think, all right, this is a question. You spent a lot of time networking with a lot of successful entrepreneurs, like at the events you at, the power room you're going to. Is that a commonality with a lot of the people that you run into that are of equal or greater or coming up, that type of mindset, that are willing to invest in that? Or is it even something that contemporaries and so on struggle with?
No, I find people that, are not that wealthy or successful, they their time or their money is worth more than their time, or their money is worth more than their peace of mind, right? So people that are very wealthy spend a fortune on consultants, on trainers, right? And then people that aren't at that level, they scoff, well, I can do that myself, and I don't need to pay someone, $50,000 to this or $10,000 to do that. But there's no better investment, I think, than investing in yourself. And if you, whatever they say, you invest in yourself, you'll reap that 10 times. And that's really been my experience, because, everything that I've gleaned about business is pretty much come from somebody else, right? I just tried to look to people that were where I wanted to be And now with today's day and age with podcasts and YouTube, and you have multi-millionaires, 100 millionaires, billionaires that are offering up advice all day long. So, what's more credible, a billionaire giving you advice, or, your brother-in-law giving you advice? No spite to my brother-in-law, but that's what I'm saying.
I want to, towards the end here, at least talk a little bit about philosophy. I mean, you're a big philosophy buff. Why? And then has that helped you in business as well? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so early on in my scaffolding career, I actually had one of our old competitors reach out to me and say, "Hey, I landed this big project," and at the time, he wanted to just rent my scaffolding because he had somebody else to put it up. He had his own guys to put it up. And at the time, I didn't have anything going on, and it was going to be up for 6 months, and he was going to pay me $15,000 a month to rent the equipment for 6 months, right? And one of the kind of regrets that I had in life up to that point was that I had never gone on, a big adventure. I'd never gone backpacking. A lot of people grab a backpack and go to Australia or go here, there, wherever in the world. And I thought, man, like, this is it, because once I start this business, I'm never going anywhere for 6 months again in my life, right? So at the time, I was involved with a group called the Art of Living, which is kind of like a meditation, spiritual philosophy group that's all over the world, really. And they have their headquarters in Bangalore, India, and they're having this big 25-year celebration in Bangalore at the same time that this guy was going to take my scaffolding. And if you went over there and worked at the ashram, helped set up, take down, whatever, you could just stay there for free, like kind of like a billet type situation, right? Wow. So I thought, well, it's pretty cool. Like, doesn't get any, India's in a really interesting country, and I was really into yogic philosophy and meditation and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, well, 6 months, pack my bags, backpack, and arrived in Bangalore, India, and lived out of the for 3 months, because I was there for 6. Lived out of the they called them ashramites. So I was an ashramite. Basically means you live and work at the ashram. You cook the food, you clean that. I mean, this was there's like 1,000 rooms at this place. It's pretty spectacular. And there was a whole bunch of people that came from all over different parts of the world. We all kind of bunked in an international house. So I had, bunkmates that were from Australia and South America and, Saudi Arabia and all over the world. And we're just this team of people for 3 months that worked and lived together and lived this, this life. And when we weren't working, we were studying yoga philosophy, or we were doing meditations at the hall. Your day was pretty structured, right? You woke up, you did your morning meditation, then you got your food, and then you worked, and then you got something to do for lunch, and then you went back to work again, then you got your meal, then you met at the meditation hall again for satsang. So it's like singing and worship songs, and then a meditation. And then if the guru was in town, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, he would be, up at the front, and he would just answer any questions about life. So yeah, that was for 3 months. And then for 3 months, I just took off and kind of did my own thing. I traveled all over the country of India. It's absolutely amazing country. If there's any place that anybody needs to see in their life before they go, it's India.
Wow.
Really cool thing about it is that because it was a British colony for so long, that you can find someone that speaks English at any given time, no matter where you are. And I've traveled to some other places where, I can't find anybody that speaks English, and it's been really tough. But India was amazing in that way, and just an amazing culture, amazing people. Just loved it over there.
What does meditation do for you? And is that something you still do regularly? And would you recommend it?
Yeah, I need to get a little bit more consistent. I think, there was a time there where, I was doing it, meditate twice a day, and now I try to meditate once a day at a minimum. But I think it's just they equate like 20 minutes of meditation to deep meditation to 5 hours of sleep. So it's just energizing. It's just helps you, focus. And the better that you get at meditating, the deeper that you go, the faster that you go. So you can't really put it into words. It's a pretty transcendental experience, and it just takes you to a place of absolute peace and bliss. And every once in a while, you have some weird, spiritual anomalies that will happen, and just kind of quiet the mind and take a break from all of the things that are vying for your attention. Just to be by yourself in this present moment, which is the only moment that we ever have, and just kind of be in that, which is a very rare state to be in. You know, the ego and the mind are always projecting us into something in the future that we're worrying about happening, or something in the past that we're traumatized by and dragging us down, or you know, whatever the case may be is, but we're very rarely in the present moment. And for me, meditation brings me into the present moment, and lifting weights actually is a form of meditation for me. That brings me into the present moment. So
if you didn't lift weights, do you think you'd be less successful?
well, lifting weights for me is like a form of, I would call it medication for myself, right? I've been diagnosed with every, you know, ADHD, you know, 3-4 letter acronym. You know, people say, well, you probably got ADHD, or you got ADD, or you're this, or you're that. And whenever I'm feeling off after I work out, I feel very centered, right? And that's just what it does for me. It's been proven that, you know, with most mental, quote unquote, mental health issues, the same endorphins, the same chemicals, they're released in the body when you work out. And then you get the added benefit of feeling, you know, you're not just popping a pill, you're making a stronger body. You're moving in this amazing vehicle that was, you know, given to you by God, and you're strengthening in it, and you just feel better. I mean, life is just better in general if you have a level of fitness. Most highly performing people they're almost like athletes with how they keep their physical fitness, right? Strong body, strong mind, all those kinds of things.
If you were to put a theme on this conversation today, like, what's the takeaway for the audience? We've been around the mountain. What's like that? If you know, it's like you're the title of your book.
Man, I don't know. We've been around in a few different places. I would say that, you know, the whole theme of my life is just, and I think it boils down to anybody to be successful, just try and be a better you every single day, right? Just keep pushing, keep striving for a 1% win every day. Your wins or losses, you know, like I said, in the seed of every failure is the seed of success, and just try to make the most of every day. That's just my general philosophy. I don't know if that really recaps the entire conversation, but yeah, that's my takeaway.
Chad, thank you for coming on the show. I don't think this will be the last, if you're willing. Thank you all for listening to the Culture Matters podcast today. And I challenge you to listen from the very beginning. Again, there's so much here, from real estate, business, culture, family, generations, philosophies, and so on. Thank you, Chad, for coming on. And we will see you all in the next episode of the Culture Matters podcast.